was fun.
Yeah.
There's a famous MMA coach or jiu-jitsu coach, I should say, John Danaher. I'm pretty sure his name.
Pause.
Yeah.
Everybody, welcome mid-conversation, but as Ben probably thought, that it was a good conversation, so let's just
we're just jumping in. Yeah, we're jumping in. So welcome to episode 3 of the Meditative Monkeys podcast. I guess a quick thing, we're going to try and make this episode a little bit more coherent by putting in chapters and putting in timestamps in the description and following just
itinerary, table of contents.
Exactly. So we're going to have go through a few topics here, but just to continue the conversation. So there's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach named John Danaher, I believe. I hope I'm not getting that wrong, but he's George St. Pierre's jiu-jitsu coach. And he's been on Joe Rogan a few times, I believe, and I've listened to a few of the podcasts. He's a really interesting guy because he's like he's almost like a robot in a way. Like he's so
calculated,
so calculated and rational, but also very soft spoken, and he's got this great story.
And almost everything has a reason in a sense, and like
well, that's his whole thing. Like he's like his whole thinking process is about creating. Like systematically thinking about and breaking down Brazilian jiu-jitsu so that he can be a better teacher and to understand
almost like numbers, right? Like how can I like number it in a weird way?
Exactly. And one thing that he talks about, which I think is probably true, is that he thinks that that people often mistake cardio as being more physiological than what it actually is, which is motor control. So he thinks that cardiovascular endurance is more about efficiency of patterning in the way that you're moving. So being able to relax when you need to relax, being able to, contract when you need to contract, contracting to the right amount, the correct coordination of muscles, like the correct patterning. So it's a neuromuscular, it's more bottlenecked by neuromuscular proficiency than it is, physiological proficiency. And the reason that you see people develop better cardio as they do something more frequently is not because necessarily their cardiorespiratory system is adapting to some great degree, but
their
rather
body's
because
getting more efficient.
Yeah, their patterning is getting more efficient. So I've been swimming weekly now, and I'm
less
finding
blood pumping, less energy used.
Yeah, less oxygen
your heart
consumed,
works less.
Less energy used. Because your movements are more efficient. Your weight, which an efficiency I think is easily defined as just not wasting energy. Not having
minimizing waste.
Yeah, minimizing waste.
Because I don't want to say not wasting. It's because I think everyone, you have to waste anyway. Like minimizing the waste that we're putting out, right?
Exactly. So, I think about that with like when I used to spar in boxing, and you would see these. I was in awe of the professional fighters, because they're going like 8 to 12 3-minute rounds, and I'm going like 3 2-minute rounds in amateur, and you get so worn out in that. And on reflection, I realized a lot of it's because of nerves and because you are inefficient in the way you move. Like I watch my old tapes, and I'm just like holding so much tension. And you would watch go on.
Sorry, I would even add in like even like mental stress, right? Like not being as like just like literally like what as we say in Greek, like nevra, like just like as your nerves, right? Like that over tension, that like stressing yourself just kills you.
That costs energy.
Dude, similar story of doing hapkido for a year with my brother, just at a pretty wicked place here close to my house. This really old guy, like he did like super crazy shit, like when like Mr. Miyagi, like one of the guys that just like knows, right? But like, and it's funny because he understood, I guess, that efficiency and everything, and like that, because I get at the end of the day, that's almost like what martial arts is breeding, that like efficient, like not even just that you're saying that like how
just
to like
ingraining it into your being.
He would do like the transfer of power to like the telephone book, or like you'd hold like 2 telephone books in your stomach, and you just go and you give like the 1-inch punch and like slap. This guy was like 80 years old, and he'd just be like bam, and you'd like fly backwards. You'd be sitting on the floor like he'll sit on the floor like an actual child, like one, like almost like 90-90, You know what I mean? Sitting in 190, and he'd be like, come here. Right? And he like always talked about like pressure points and this and that. And you would stand, and you go, stand. He goes, and he would just like put his knuckle like on your foot, and you drop. You drop. You would literally like drop. And then he would explain it, right? And he'd be like, there's this pressure point here. Like, you know, the more advanced you get, the more he was like going to teach you like stuff like that. But to get to the sparring, so, you know, you always think you're sick, especially at younger ages, you know, and being athletic too, like compared to like the people my age and like my brother's age, like I was like very athletic compared to them. So I'm like, oh, like I'm sick, right? Like, yeah, I'll kick ass. So we do a little bit of a sparring session with a little bit of the more experienced people, and it was 1 minute for 5 rounds, 5 minutes. You go in a circle, right? And you would spar one person, not like light sparring and stuff, but like tapping you and whatever. First person, you know, feeling all right, like still getting beat up, but like feeling all right. I'm like, I'm sick. Halfway through the second person, my body just starts failing on me. Like all the blocks, lifting your arm, keeping your arms up, and you just realize how hard this shit is and how crazy conditioning is. By the third person, I'm kicked in the head, slapped in the head, kicked in the. By the fifth person, I was basically just a test dummy. And I was literally getting like foot here, like I'm like trying to get my hands up. I'm like, and they're like, get your like they're, you know, encouraging everything, but it's just like you're like, wow, this shit is absolutely insane.
Well, GSP, Joe St. Pierre, would talk about how he would find that the way he would think of a fight or preparing for a fight is that the training is about ingraining those patterns. It's about coming up with a strategy, you know, analyzing your opponent, making predictions about, you know, what they're going to do, coming up with tools to counter that and a path to victory. And you're just practicing that in the gym so that when you get into the octagon,
it just happens.
It's just autopilot. Like it's just, you're both of you are just two, you know, automatons just going at it, tool versus tool.
And you know, he shoots to the left and he goes to shoot and your body automatically closes to the left or something. You know what I mean? Like,
and we saw that exploited beautifully by George Masvidal against Ben Askren, you know, this last year when he did that flying knee. Yeah, in 5 second
Ben
knockout.
Askren rushes in, yeah.
And he rushes in, and he noticed that whenever Ben Askren's rushed, he always goes down towards their hips in the same direction with the same technique, and that served him really well because he's probably very efficient at it. So when he nailed it, it worked.
Yeah, and to be honest, he probably had not only success at like starting fights like that, but he's probably had success in multiple fights in multiple rounds in the same fights. You know what I mean? So it became like you become like again, I'm sick.
Yeah.
Right, and then all of a sudden, you sick knee to the head.
Yeah, and then someone figures out a counter. They figure out how to.
You know, the funny, like the one hits like that and like the one knockouts like that, it's funny because it's like, don't get me wrong, like all power to that fighter and it's sick. But you know, it's almost, it's crazy, but it's almost like anything could happen if that didn't happen. You know what I mean? But it happened, so you can't say anything.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like, it's almost weirder for like, you know, you pick a guy apart. Like my favorite was like Triple G, Gennady Golovkin.
Yeah.
In boxing.
Yeah.
Like this guy would pick people apart, and he was such a G and so confident in his skills and his abilities. Like him and another in the boxing world, Lomachenko, are like two guys I think are the epitome of understanding like just their body and their skills so much and have so much belief in them that they even know like their limits. Like Golovkin will let guys hit him for rounds and he knows when to turn it off and stop. You know what I mean? Like to have that confidence in yourself that you're letting people hit you because you've read him so much and you understand your body and how you take punches and you understand his power transfer and like all these things are calculated all the time. And you're like, you know, and he would say this at the end of fights, like I didn't want to end the fight too early, so I gave the fans extra rounds. I let them hit me a little bit.
Yeah. Wow.
But imagine that as an opponent too. Imagine that, right?
Well, I think that's what we love as fans. It's like a fighter that is undeniable. And I think that's the problem in the UFC with someone like Francis Ngannou right now, because he's on such a streak, but he wins all his fights.
He's like a monster.
He wins all his fights by just throwing his fists around.
Hopefully, I wasn't little Keanu. Daddy, I learned how to walk.
No, it's just a guitar.
I'll never walk again.
But like Ngannou, like, you know, swings his fist and he's so powerful. He knocks guys out in 5 seconds. But that doesn't really tell you. It doesn't tell you much. It tells you that he can knock guys out in 5 seconds, but it doesn't tell you.
But I do find though, then you have the guys like GSP, but then you have guys like Ngannou that are like just brute, like physicality. Like this guy's body is just like, his bones are thick.
But don't we want all of it? We want both. Like if you could imagine the ultimate like superhero fighter, it would be both, right?
I would say Mike Tyson is pretty close to that when he was in his prime.
But wouldn't it be like Muhammad Ali with Mike Tyson's power?
Yeah. Well, no, yeah, for crossbreeding.
That's what, but crossbreeding. Take a bit of Ali and take a bit of Tyson and just put them together in a lab.
Sprinkle it on top.
Well, no, but I mean, but we're talking about like you've got the GSP, which is like the tactician, and you've got Ngannou, who's the powerhouse. What I'm saying is, but wouldn't the ultimate fighter be a combination of both? Someone who's like teach Ngannou to be a tactician, and that would be so much more impressive than just swinging fists and knocking people out.
Yeah, and you do see that sometimes with athletes that are willing to
dodge steroid tests.
Yeah, well, we all know that all athletes are on TRT, aren't they all?
Well, yes,
right,
or something.
some
we assume that's true
because somehow being 225-pound man at like 6'3" and pure muscle, you need TRT. Like you're low test, obviously.
Dude, you should have seen me at 20.
Yeah, right.
I got to get back to my prime.
Craziness. But just to go back on like the patterning and like stuff like that, like Lomachenko from like the other route of like not having the brute strength is so crazy because his dad and transferable skills. His dad said, "You're not gonna fight until this age, but you're gonna do traditional Ukrainian, I believe it is, dancing."
Yeah, and gymnastics, I think.
And gymnastics. And this guy literally has created the Lomachenko footwork. Like he has created his own move.
Yeah, gyms will teach the Lomachenko slip.
Because he's bringing something else that is just, who else in the fighting world has ever done Ukrainian dance?
Dude, it's beautiful. It's beautiful to watch compilations or even just these fights. Like to watch Lomachenko do Lomachenko is marvelous.
It's Lomachenko.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Lomachenko. Yeah, it's just so good. He is so good.
Should we move on to the first topic?
Heroes.
Yeah, so the first topic we're going to talk about now is I thought it would be interesting to discuss the hero's journey as it relates to working out, training, practicing. Yeah. So you're going to say something?
I was just going to say, as you guys are just hearing this probably maybe for the first time, I'm also hearing this for the explanation of the hero's journey for the first time. So we're all on the hero's journey together.
Yeah. So one of our goals with the podcast, right, is every week we want to have some improvement. That's the marker for success for us right now. It's not listeners or anything like that. It's just
how can we get better?
Yeah, how can we get better? It's just a little project of like every week we want to improve. So we're starting with subjects this week, where we're attempting like no debrief. I haven't explained what we're going to talk about quite yet to Steve in this topic.
And as we've mentioned in other videos, guys, if you watch this, I don't know why my camera's doing all that, but if you watch this, feedback is highly welcome.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. That's all.
If you love it, let us know. If you hate it, fuck off.
Let us know and then fuck off. And then fuck off. Let us know what is wrong and then fuck off.
Yeah, exactly. In that order. So for this topic, we want to talk about the idea of the hero's journey and how it relates to training. So
you literally just cut out the idea of
the hero's journey and how it relates to training.
There we go.
So a little bit of background. So there was a professor of literature, an American professor of literature, who was around in the 20th century. Like he was born 1904 and died in 87. His name was Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell was famous for a few things, but the big one is that he developed this theory of what he called the monomyth in his book, A Hero with a Thousand Faces. And so the idea with the hero's journey and the monomyth is that he looked at all the major, like all the stories that we love as humans throughout culture. Okay. You know, all the stories of Jesus and of Gautama the Buddha, and of Muhammad, but in pop culture as well, in superheroes and just the stories that humans tell one another and that we seem captivated by and that we seem to go back to time and time again. And he looked at what might be common amongst these stories, like is there a common pattern that can be found, and he developed this theory of the monomyth, the singular myth, that there's this structure that underlies all these stories that is common amongst them, and that this can be kind of broken down into steps, the hero's journey is the story of, it's kind of the archetypal story of the hero, and their path, their journey. Now I can break it down quite simply, and I think it would make it easy for our discussion to use a version of the hero's journey that has been adopted or made also famous by TV writer Dan Harmon, who wrote Community and writes for Rick and Morty, if you're familiar with that show. And he talks about it in terms of the story circle. So he basically believes that a good story in any form of storytelling,
any fashion,
should follow 8 steps.
This is the template.
And this is the template, and he tries to replicate this in his writing as well. So I've got the steps for you. I'll read them out to you, and then I just want your reaction, and I think I hope that you'll be able to easily see how I think this relates to training and to working out. So imagine you just got an individual, like a character, your protagonist, the hero of the story.
Just like you sent me?
Yeah. Yeah, character select screen. So step 1.
Okay.
The hero is in a zone of comfort. So they're in a familiar place. Okay. Step 2, but they want something.
Okay.
Stage 3 is that they then go on to enter an unfamiliar situation. Okay. Step 4 is that they adapt to the unfamiliar situation. Okay. Step 5 is that they get what they want or get what they wanted. Stage 6 is that yet they have to pay a heavy price. Stage 7 is that they then go to return home or to return back to the familiar situation. And then stage 8 is that they are back in that familiar situation, but something about them has now changed. Okay. So it's the 8 stages. I think it's like an octave, right? It's like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, musical octave. It's the 8 stages of the story circle. Yeah.
Wow, you blew our mind. It's any cycle of learning, any exercise in the gym. Yeah. Literally, it's like the cycle of I want to say it's almost like the cycle of like any life, right? Like almost everything. It's like,
well, I would argue it's the cycle of a good life, because you can imagine the scenario, like this isn't an inevitable process, because like in the stage where
this is the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so this is
like
story.
if you're hitting this journey, you're on the hero's journey, but like that requires you to hit 8.
Yeah. Because like I think you could go through it and be like, hey, you're in a zone of comfort, but you want something. Some people don't seem to want anything, so maybe you just stop there, right? But some people,
Do you feel like a hero sometimes?
Well, that's what I'm kind of getting at here is I think the reason that we train, the reason we stick with it with a practice is because it's our own personal way of living out a hero's journey. Yeah. Within our own lives. Yeah. And I think the fact, maybe I don't know why that's so meaningful, but the fact that the hero's journey is the underlying structure for all the stories that we tell ourselves, and stories are kind of the foundation of the history of human beings. It's how we communicate and tell each other things and have culture, that this maybe is a very meaningful process and a very meaningful thing. And so for whatever reason, for whatever reason it's meaningful, the fact that we strive to live this out in our lives with our training is like a very meaningful thing. And I think it's why we do it.
And I think just like we talked about, like in previous podcasts and everything, like what is like perfection, what is like an ultimate goal, all these things. I think the cool thing about the hero's journey is that if you're doing it what we call the so-called right way, and you're getting more in tune with your body, you're technically in some regards, or even your own regard, and I can only speak personally, feel more and more like a superhero. You know what I mean? Superhero. Like you just understand more. Like you feel more and more capable. You know, and
listen to what you just said. Listen
right?
to what you just said. You understand more and you feel more capable. You didn't say you become stronger with thicker muscles and you develop the physicality, which you might. You develop a physicality. But you understand more. There's some deep there's a knowledge component. There's an embodiment component, and you feel more. There's an emotion, like this. It's an emotional thing too.
Yeah.
So that hero state is not just like, because I think it often gets mistaken as just the aesthetic. It's all about the way a hero is the way that they look.
I think we could break that down even more, and I think people just stop at certain stages, right? And I think that stage for me of the bodybuilding, like the muscles and just get big and strong, was part of that cycle for me. But I wanted to continue that cycle, and I maybe had pushes to continue that cycle with injury and stuff. But you could look from like a running route, right? Like runners, right? They're definitely pushing their body to some sort of limit, and if they decided to take other routes on mobility and this and that, they would have a lot of transferable skills, but they just don't decide to continue those cycles, right?
So I'm going to drop, maybe I brought this up to you before, but I'm going to drop the stuff, this shit I love. I didn't come up with this saying, but it's just actually by Sean in Miami.
Nice. Good dude, guys. If you're ever in Miami, please
Republic
go.
of Movement.
Yeah, Republic of Movement. I don't obviously know the address, or PO box, whatever they use
Look it up. Google it.
Wait, what do we do here? United States of America. America.
But he wrote in an Instagram post a while ago. I can't remember the context, but this one line stood out to me.
Fairly recent?
No, it's about a year, maybe a year ago.
Okay. Because he writes pretty good shit too.
Yeah. And he might have brought this up again, but I Googled this to see if he got this from somewhere, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So this seems to be original. So all credit to Sean. That a cycle of cycles isn't a cycle; it's a spiral. And to me,
you're almost always going up.
Yeah. So this hero's journey is describing one cycle, but in terms of growth, it's not just about
to stairway to heaven.
It's about having a cycle of cycles that create that spiral, that upward trajectory, or it could spiral downwards too, or in some other direction.
I guess that makes total sense too.
So
I'm sure there's you can apply the same hero's journey to a negative.
Of course. Yeah. The anti-hero's journey, or So I want to just let's take an example. Let's do a little exercise. I think you'd like this.
Sure.
Let's take that example just to I guess this would be to illustrate this whole idea.
Oh, I already have one in the fitness world. I can do it right now.
Well, I want you to do a personal one that you just brought up, but you can bring that up too in a moment. So let's go through those stages. I'll read them out one at a time, and you can give me your thoughts on it.
Okay.
Apply it to that idea of when you began and wanting to just put on muscle.
Okay.
So let's start with number one. So you're in a zone of comfort. So what was that? What would that situation be?
Like comfort prior to working out?
Yeah, prior to working out, before, just like the moments, or the life just before you started working out to get big.
Physical athlete, soccer. So I was on the athletic side, but I was comfortable. That's all I did. That was my exercise.
Your sport. Cool. Perfect.
Leisure, skateboarding, stuff like this. I always did.
And it was familiar. It's stuff you'd learn, you knew when you were doing.
Yeah, repetitive.
Perfect. Step two, you decide that you want something.
Yes. What did I want?
Yeah, what did you want?
I wanted big muscles and women.
Cool.
And that's the truth. I was 19, 20. I believe I'd just broken up with my first girlfriend.
You're 19, 20, single, fit.
Single. No, I was. Well, if I.
Were you playing sport?
You know what we'll do? No, but I'll send you pictures, and you'll maybe be able to do like a weird slideshow with it of like the pre-workout. I was like slender man, but
right about now, right about now, I'll see if I can edit in Steve. Hold on, Steve, pre-working out.
Yeah, that'll be good. Now.
And now. Yeah. Yeah.
And now.
Wow, what a comparison.
Shem, wow. You're gonna love my nuts. But anyways.
So you're at stage 2, you wanted muscles in women. Perfect.
That's it. I was 20 years old, just got a relationship, and my buddy came back from school. Here was the thing. I knew it was attainable because my buddy did it. He did it.
Okay.
He was like the test
role
subject. Model. I didn't know he was going to do it, but he went to school, McMaster, Stephen Coots again, call you out. He went to school, McMaster. He came back and he had gotten size. And I was like, and he convinced me to go to the gym with him because we also played soccer together. So there was that level of camaraderie, like, oh, I'll help with soccer. Let's go. Right. But mainly women and muscles.
So you had a role model as well. Perfect. Stage 3, you enter an unfamiliar situation.
Oh boy, was it ever? I remember my shoulder, because I had a shoulder injury. I had a really bad fall in soccer before I ever started working out. I went up for a header, and it was at practice, and we played with like different ages, and we had a couple of younger kids on the team. I mean, he was probably like 16, but he was like a super small kid, good soccer player. And he ducked, not his fault. He just ducked, and I went over him, and I just kind of landed on my arm this way. And I heard like a crackle, snap, pop, whatever. But not a goalie. Didn't use my hands. Skateboarded, played soccer. I'm like, whatever. I'm like, hurts, but whatever. It'll heal. Yeah. Didn't know anything about compensations. Didn't know anything about creating bad chains, patterning, all these things. Losing function of actual muscles, losing function of just like sections of your body. You know what I mean? And went about my business, and everything felt fine in my world. Everything was fine, right? That back to the stage 1, right? Everything was fine. And when I got into the gym, it was really bad. Pull-ups, I would go up, and I would come in.
Ooh.
Like bad. Bench, it would just give out. Dumbbells, it would give out. It would just shoot out from under me. It would just 100 power, 0 power. 3-4 more reps with the right side. Didn't know anything about rehab. Didn't know anything about that. So definitely built in some really, really shitty patterning there. But yeah. Anyway, stage 3, stage 4. We'll break that down even more though later.
You're describing how you entered an unfamiliar situation, and so the unfamiliar situation, applying it from like you went from just playing sports, you had that injury, and then you started to. So, what was the unfamiliar situation you entered into?
It was my body. That's kind of the funny part about it, right?
Okay, I see what you're saying.
You think and you think you're capable. And even with the sport, right? Like you have this almost like this false idea that you're healthy and capable, but you're capable for one thing. And
your familiar situation of playing your sport, that the novelty was that in this case the shoulder was exposed by all these new movements, these new loading.
I would even go crazy. Like that was a part of it, but even like the unfamiliarity of just like benching and feeling my stabilizers not working, and like and waking up, you know what I mean, and like just all that, like this end of the first week, couldn't even wash my hair in the shower. Like I was doing this.
Fuck.
I could not raise my hand. I was like, and I couldn't even like hold the bottle. I was like, right? But because of, and I will attest my years of soccer to it, I had like a very competitive growing up, but like healthy and competitiveness. Like I was never a bad sport. Well, sometimes I was a little bitch, but we all are growing up, right? But for the most part, like fairly good sport, very encouraging to everyone else, but still always wanted to be the best in that regard.
Sure.
Right. So like even with all that going, I still wanted to finish first, and I would have rather have said, you guys did great. I wouldn't say I finished first, but like you guys did great and still finished first. You know what I mean? Like type of thing, right? Because healthy competition.
Sure.
Right. So when I got into the gym and I started to like get all that unfamiliarity and then feel all the unfamiliarity, but but cool things. It was kind of nice and new, right? It was like, it was intriguing.
Yeah.
It was intriguing, you know?
So then that takes us to stage 4, which is that
Mm-hmm.
you adapt to the unfamiliar situation.
Yes. Yes. And that was just, again, learning, reading, doing stuff with, it was nice to have a friend too, because it was bounce back motivation, you know, reading up on supplements, you know, reading up on workouts, reading up on just the dietary stuff, just whatever avenue I thought that was going to reach me to my hollow goal that I had.
Well, can you also talk about like the adaptation, maybe in the context of the shoulder, like you're in this unfamiliar situation, and then
Yeah.
I'm sure that was there there would have been a physical,
Oh yeah.
physiological
Yeah,
adaptation
yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
Well, of course, right? So then I started to understand DOMs, and I started to be able to work around it or work with it and understand, as I said, what they mean and what's creating what. Then I didn't really look at it in as intricate as I did now, but
Sure.
but being a little bit more, I would say, just open-minded, I would pay attention and I would really try and fix it. And I would ask myself, like, why doesn't it work? I didn't know the answers. I didn't know that, well, not that I know the answers now, but I know more now than I did before. But, you know, I didn't know that I would get to this point and learn all this stuff about it now.
Yeah.
But those questions and then trying to work and trying to understand it have led me here, I guess, today, right? Cycle. We'll get there, actually, stage 4.
So stage 5 is that you get what you wanted. So what you wanted originally was to get muscles, get girls. How did that go?
Yeah. Well, then just like any cycle, so I had an actual set. So I had a weight. I wanted to get from 150, 155, whatever I was, at like 5'11", 6 feet, depending on the shoes, um, to 175. That was my first goal.
Okay.
And then I didn't, and back to like learning and refining stage 3. I didn't know that, especially in the beginning, gains could happen so fast. And it's funny how, you're right, cycles spiral, because then you get tricked that the gains happen so fast, and then it flips the other way. And then you gotta refine a different way.
Yeah.
Right. I started refining my goals because I started excelling so fast, and then here I started to not only like refine my goals in a sense of like, you know, like add more. Sometimes I have to take away and change, or like change my goals to like fix something, you know, as opposed to like just success.
Yeah, exactly. So did you get what you wanted? So did you put on the size?
So I
Did
hit
you
my
get the girls?
175. There was not much of a shortage, let's say. But here's the funny part, right? I actually attested a lot of this to like the physique and this and that. This was a little bit later too. Like I got to 175 and I got to 180, and then you get ILS and everything, you know.
Then I got fat.
Walking around. I did actually. I got to what, 215. Like you go, it's refinement, right?
Yeah. It's like learning to drive. Yeah, you gotta.
Right.
Gotcha.
When I was playing soccer, I actually had a limit of weight. I would tell myself no more than 205. 205 was my science cutoff of where Steven gets too slow.
Okay.
And he can't maximize like his speed. At like under 205, I was still faster than most people. And even if they were a little faster than me, I could just body the shit out of them.
Dude,
imagine 200-pound guy playing soccer back in the day. It was crazy. Dude, guys would bounce off me, and I would get pissed off because the ref would call foul, and I'm like, I can't. The guy's 150 pounds.
What do you want me to do?
I'm like, I'm not even. I was that guy that took the shirt off after the game, even though it was actually.
Dude, you're the guy that takes his shirt off always for every occasion.
Halftime.
Time to put your shirt on. All right.
But yeah, so then I started. I got what I want. I got what I wanted. I started getting all that stuff, right?
Okay, so then stage 6 is that you pay a heavy price.
Yeah, pay the heavy price. You know what's funny? I did. I would attest my hamstring to paying the heavy price.
With the injury that you're suffering.
Yeah, I I did something to my hamstring growing in 2017 that was pretty severe.
Yeah.
And I actually think that was the price I paid for the cycle of learning. And like I was saying earlier, I think a lot of people stop at certain steps. And that's why certain steps don't happen. or like you just, you know, you opt out of a step because the cycle's hard, right? But if you want to continue that spiral and continue learning, it's just like, you're just building blocks,
Yeah.
right? And that was the price I paid from like really, you know, pushing my body to the limits one way with, and again, something I didn't know, but like the mobility aspect and the like, and just because you can do something doesn't mean you're doing it right, and doesn't mean you're building proper strength. You know, as I say, structures have limitations, and when you hit those structural limitations, it's not just failing on a bench press. Sometimes a lot of times it's catastrophic, and that's where injuries happen, right? And I'm actually happy for the injury, to be honest. You know, like looking back now, as bittersweet as it is, and I'm sure it took me a long time to say that, and we've talked about this many times over the years, but you know, that injury was in the long run for me better. You know, I was mad about soccer, I was mad about these things, but in reality, soccer was just, it's leisure. It was fun for me, especially at that point. There was no future to that, right? So that injury almost set me down a path where now, instead of just playing soccer my whole life, I can try and get more capable and keep being capable and understand what that means, you know, and hopefully pass that on to people too, as we're trying to do here.
So stage 7 is that you return back to a familiar situation. This one is maybe a little trickier, but I'm kind of struggling with this a little bit to apply.
I got it. So just like kind of building muscle, right? You go through the cycles. You start light, you build the patterns, you get heavier, you add more resistance, or you add more difficulty to it. But now you're doing it with that failed understanding of before. You know, you went through like the cycle and you understood what you did wrong. You paid the price, and now you're patching that price up with the proper knowledge,
stage 7 and 8 are more like they're a bit more interconnected. You return to a familiar situation, having changed. It's kind of like the stage 7 is you the journey back home, and then stage 8 is your home and different. You know, you could think of this narratively, obviously, as like, you know, the hobbits going back to going back home, but in the training context, it might be something like, you know, you start in a place where you're rested, you're comfortable, you want to develop a certain skill or build muscle, whatever. So you go into an unfamiliar situation, you put some novel stress on the body, you do a new movement, whatever. You know, you adapt to it, you get what you wanted, but you've paid a price, whether it's like the time invested, the energy spent, maybe there's some other injury or some compensation, or maybe you've gotten weaker at another thing in order to get stronger at that one thing.
Even the DOMs, I would say, is paying a price, right?
Yeah.
Like how many people don't get past the DOMs? Like I've had clients full on quit because they're too sore.
Yeah, the muscle soreness.
They did not come back to sessions.
Yeah, for whatever
reason. They did not come
yeah.
back to the gym, right?
Yeah.
And it, you know, it's just I was too sore.
Yeah.
Or clients continually trying to refine workouts to be less and less because they're too sore.
And then the returning back home and then having changed could just be like, well, your body recovers from like the DOMs, it recovers from those situations, from the price, and you're back in that state where you're ready to start again if you want to, but now you've taken on what you learned from that last cycle, you know, and you can take that forward.
Even to make it simpler, like just in like simple call, it's like you start, you have an interest, you put effort to learn it. You know, paying the price is the time to learn it, and then you refine. Then it's like the next cycle, right?
And it's the time to learn it, and it's also like the cost is sacrificing the things you might be doing otherwise. Yeah, it's like the hypothetical stuff that you're not doing.
Time, at the end of the day, time is the most cost.
Yeah, essentially.
Right, you're choosing to put effort in towards something, hoping that your efforts are going to make you better in it.
Yeah,
and and at the end of the day, that could have been a waste of time.
Yeah,
as they say, right? That could have been the cost.
So I think, I mean, maybe this is a thing that we can come back to in future episodes, so that we don't just spend the next 3 hours all on all on the hero's journey. But like, I think it's pretty. I was just thinking about it the other day, and I just thought it was so relatable, and I thought it would be. I mean, it's an interesting model, and it might be a good tool. I don't know, to assess when you're hitting roadblocks or having barriers in training, for example, but maybe anywhere in life, because you might be like, okay, well, I'm stuck right now, but if I look at this cycle, like where am I at right now? Like maybe I'm
And it almost, as you were saying, it would probably give you a nice reference point, but also give you like a nice light at the end of the tunnel. You know, like maybe
Exactly.
like all this is worth it. You know, as people say all the time, you know, keep pushing, keep pushing. The diamonds on the next one, the guy turned back first, like stuff like that. You know, sometimes it sounds like all fantasy, but as I'm sure you know, and like even in your personal life, in your business life, and like just you're very open to learning, and I think that's part of that cycle because you have to pay attention at each part of the cycle to be able to get to the next part. You know
Yeah,
what I
well,
mean? You have,
that's being in that unfamiliar situation and adapting to
yeah,
it. Like
you know,
learning's like something you have to keep going back to. Is that learning's a
yeah,
struggle. Like you always forget it, but it's like when you're there
mm-hmm.
trying to read a book or something, or like watch a video or practice something
Mm-hmm.
yourself, like the mind is going in 1,000 different directions trying to
Yeah.
just get distracted by anything.
And funny you say that because I actually, now that you're breaking it down, I almost think that's the spot, that's the hardest spot for a lot of people, right? Like you have interest in something, you put forth an effort to try and learn it. Like a lot of people, you know, like let's for example, golf, right? It's a very tough one. You know, you play a little bit,
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
right? You know, how many people, like, I don't even want to say golf, like everything in life.
yeah.
So many people buy stuff. I'm going to do it. They try,
Buy the book, buy like they'll buy a cookbook,
yeah,
buy the manual, they'll buy the equipment.
yeah. And it's like, you're not even giving yourself a chance to learn before you quit.
Yeah, you expect to get
Yeah.
you expect to get the orgasm without the foreplay or the build up.
Of course, it's shit.
Yeah,
Shit product,
yeah,
right? Of course you're not gonna like it.
yeah.
You know, fuck, like kiss it a little bit. You know, like tease it, like ah, you know. But it's just, I don't know, bro.
Exactly. Titillate.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Diddler.
so that's yeah, anyway, that's kind of the topic I want to talk about, the hero's journey. Like we can come back to it, but
Yeah,
just so we can get through maybe some of the other topics for today and just see how this goes. And like maybe in future episodes we'll just dive into one topic like this, but
yeah.
this week we'll kind of we'll kind of rapid fire them a little bit
Of
and
course.
see how it goes. So topic number 2 for this week would be, I want to have a discussion about structured versus intuitive, or
Mm-hmm.
open versus closed training, we might think
Yeah.
of it as. So I think this is a good one for us to talk about because I think just judging from what I know about you and what I've learned of you over
Yeah.
the years and just comparing our approach to training, I would say that I think I prefer a more structured approach to
Mm-hmm.
training where I like to, I've come to learn that I really like to plan my workouts,
Mm-hmm.
to even plan my week to some degree, knowing what days I'm going to be training, maybe even planning now months in advance or even years in
Yeah.
advance for some skills. I like being on time, having a certain amount of like structure in terms of when I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to train, the rest periods. Like I was working out doing squats the other day. A guy worked in with me and I asked him, that's fine, just how much rest are you going to take in between
Yeah.
sets? And he's like, rest? Like how much? Oh, like,
1.5
I
minutes.
no, he was like, oh, just until I want to go again. You know, like, okay, yeah, fair enough. Like a couple of minutes probably,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, yeah. So
Yeah.
I really like structured training, but I recognize that, you know, there's value in that more open, intuitive approach where
Yeah.
you're just feeling your way through it. And I think that's more a style that you're more comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that could be a really good topic to contrast and compare the two
Yeah.
styles, talk about what we find are the advantages of each style and
Mm-hmm.
also the disadvantages, and maybe what is the time and the place for each style. Um,
I was thinking about this, and you know me, I even personally say this about myself. I think I'm a little bit too far on the intuitive spectrum.
okay.
You know, I personally think that there is a lot of value to structure. What I was thinking about actually earlier when we were talking about the other stuff in the cycle, just because it kind of reminded me of it, I think there is, and this might be where we differ a little bit too, by the way, like coming from like my soccer, like sports team background of like just randomly getting up and going to play and always having to be ready to play, and like, you know, being on the bench. It's not like, you know, you did a lot of fighting when you were younger. It's like you're going in rings, set rings, time. Me, I'm on the bench. It's like go,
Yeah.
sit, go, practice, sit. You, hey, you, hey, come here. Ponytail, had a ponytail. Come here. Right? Like, so it's like stuff like that, right? And coming from the soccer background, even like with the training, and you'll even understand this too, because even though you do a lot more structure, your structure, I think, turns into a little bit of intuitive, because your intuitive is through structure, like doing, like when you were doing like all the movement based stuff, like having like free flowing time. It was within structure, but it was intuitive.
Yeah.
And I think in a weird way, structure is always going to want to lead to some sort of intuitive, because that's the whole point, right? Like, how can I just almost like seamlessly do this? Because as we talk about, like deadlifting and hinging and pulling and pushing happens so much that you want to have some of that structure lead over, right? Like and I go back to soccer, like a guy, like training, right? Like in the beginning, like there's so much structure, like, okay, everyone line up, 5 on the right, 5 on the left. And then the more that you get better, it's more like, okay, we're just gonna, play a lot of free space time, a lot of scrimmage time, a little bit structured, like we're gonna work on, set plays 5-on-3, but it's more on the intuitive. Can you use those skills now?
I think that's
application.
I think that's a really interesting point. I wonder if you said something like, if you're,
but you can always hop back, right? You can always do the cycle, because you can always learn something else, which is going to cause you to go to the more structured side, right? Of like, let's say you've done a lot of body weight stuff, but you've never done a handstand. You might be able to go through the cycle faster, but you still got to start here, right?
Yeah.
But you understand the cycles more, so it's easier to pick off the important stuff and like what's going to be beneficial to you personally too, and all that stuff, right?
So one of the keys that we've discussed before is it's about avoiding autopilot. It's about like kind of being aware and attentive and being conscious in what you're doing. And I think that's a key.
That's a problem that comes with intuitive. Intuitive.
Well, I think it could be a problem with both, and I think that's the key, because you said that, if you're structured, it inevitably leads to a bit of intuitive. And I think only if you pay attention. I think if you're on autopilot, that's where the problem lies. Like if you're on autopilot and intuitive, then everything is just random and whatever you feel like in that moment. And it's and it doesn't, the cycles are never complete, and they don't, and the spiral doesn't go in one direction. It doesn't build into anything.
It's too sporadic to like catch. In a weird way. It's like too sporadic to catch the chains, right? Like you're doing a little bit here, and if you just add a little bit of this, it would connect and come, but like you're going here.
Yeah, exactly. But if you're too structured,
sometimes they catch, right? Yeah.
If you do it, but if it does catch, it's random and you don't understand why, so you can't replicate it.
Yeah, of course.
The problem with structured, if you go on autopilot, is that you just rely on the structure and you're not attentive when you're doing the thing. You're just following the routine. It's like, I'm going to do this exercise this many times, rest this amount on these days. And while you're doing it, you're thinking about a million other things. You're just going through the motions. A lot of people do this when they hire personal trainers, right? They just they outsource their attention to the personal trainer, thinking that as long as I just mechanically go through what they're telling me, I'm going to get the results, which we know isn't true.
Of course, you need to. That's why, and I just thought of this for me personally, and how I kind of try and depict it in my mind to break it down even more internally is, I think of my structure, literally my structure, and I try and be intuitive about it.
Oh man, you know what I'm thinking of? It's like when people have this sense, and I'm not saying this is wrong, I think maybe they're actually quite correct, where some people talk more about the energy and the flows, and they're being more less this material form, but more the energy and the spiritual nature of them,
right? How does my body feel?
And both are valid, but we know people that are just stuck in their bodies and just like all physical and material, and we know people that are all woo and in the spiritual realm, and both of them kind of seem off in some way, right? It's when that's
middle, right?
It's that integration. So then what you're saying there made me think, I wonder if you're whether you start being more intuitive or you start being more structured in your preference, if the goal is growth, you're going to pay attention. And as you go through by paying attention along either path, you're going to start to realize that you need to take elements from the opposite.
Yep.
Because like you said, that's why I found a way to practice an intuitive approach to training by putting it within a box of structure.
Yes.
I'm going to do a
go have fun.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. Go within this structure, like a child, exactly like a child. Within this structure, of a certain number of sets of a certain amount of time within certain parameters, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And that opened it up for me. And then vice versa, you could, if someone's really open and just like really loves to just flow, well, you can help them appreciate that you could actually develop more complexity in your flow if you work with a little bit of structure to fill out these moves and
try
fill out your repertoire.
Try doing this, and then
try compartmentalizing
now doing what you were doing before.
Yeah.
So that's why I actually think athletes are very intuitive, but within their body, in a weird way, in the fitness realm, low structure. Because a lot of their working out, a lot of their working out, a lot of the stuff is just like not necessarily paying attention to, like, again, like what needs to happen. It's like, how does my body just go? And they're relying on like the repetitives to create that patterns, versus if you like taught this guy how to understand like what his shoulder needs to do. And now he's not only just paying attention to shoot, he understands what his shoulder needs to do, and then he could put, it's like adding that next level.
Yeah. And I think that's often why great athletes aren't the best coaches, because they aren't, if they only understand things on an intuitive level for them and their body and the way they do things.
Smart. You're right.
Yeah.
I think great people like that, like from the physical aspect, I think LeBron James tapped into a good trainer that is teaching him a lot of that stuff, because even his physique changed and his posture and everything changed in the last 5 years. He went from being more heavy set to being lean, mean, mobility, moving machine. And then another guy like that is like Cristiano.
Yeah, he's amazing. Hey?
Right? But Cristiano, in a funny way, comes from it in a vain way. But because of vanity, he creates symmetry in his body. And because he has symmetry, he has balance. You know what I mean? And it's a weird way. And like, that's where like that's why his physique stays so balanced. It's like he's so caught up in being the best and wants to be the best forever, that he might not be doing it from like a health standpoint. Like, I just want to be healthy forever. I want to be healthy and be the best soccer player forever. He's still getting healthy, and he's still going to be healthy forever because of that. He's going to have different issues than we're all going to have, because of just, no matter how healthy you could be with mobility, you're just, that wear and tear of sport is going to murder your joints to a certain extent. But like, you know, comparable to other players and having that career, like he like, even just the ability of him like flexing all the time. I joke, but like, he's working all those muscles and trying to get him to continually work in unison. Like, even when he works out, he flexes like heavy. You could see it, right? And a lot more of that is coming into play now. I think a lot more, that more connectivity of the body is more important, as opposed to like the subsections.
Well, that's kind of why I've come around on trying to be less negative and critical and negatively critical of people who get into training for what might be seen as vain reasons.
Yeah.
Because I think like we're talking about, it's that, even that's part of, like we gave an example earlier of you in the previous topic of you can go through a hero's journey of pursuing aesthetics, but I think it's ultimately about growth. And if you really want to grow, like the intuitive and structured approach, if you really want to grow, eventually you're going to realize that I need to start taking things from the other side. And so
sorry, I don't want us to come off, because we're not as like trying to like say like, don't go be a bodybuilder. What we're trying to
that's
say
my point. That's my point. That's what I'm saying, is that I am coming around on being less negative about that, because I think whatever the access point is, as long as you're getting into it and developing a practice and pursuing that hero's journey of growth and development and being a better you, and you keep paying attention, then as long as you keep paying attention and stay on that path, then you will find, like, you'll find some way, and that way will almost definitely require adopting other methods. Like that's with both of us, that's our story.
Exactly. Understanding that not only by using other methods, it's not only just going to help you get to your goal, but most times than not, it's going to allow you to exceed the goal that you had before.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're adding different buildings. Like a lot of people, like I used to train at this I still do, Pape in Danforth, Good Life. And there was this one guy there. He's like super strong dude, like squatting, deadlifting, benching heavy, pause bench, everything. Always had an injury. And I told him mobility, and he and this was when I was first getting into it with the hamstring, when I started to learn a lot of stuff from like you guys and whatever, right? And one of like the craziest things is like I started to just get it was like just here, and I started to learn and notice a difference in my body, and I started to notice the cross reference, right? My bench started to feel better. Didn't necessarily get like more weight or more reps, but I started to feel stable and sturdy. I started to pay attention more. I started to understand what the joints were doing, because I was asking my body questions. You know, he was just asking his body, how much can you push? He wasn't asking, how good can my shoulders work as I'm pushing as much as I can? And that's all kind of, I didn't know how to depict it, I guess, as good as I can now to him. But that's what's kind of trying to depict him. He like laughed at me, mobility, mumbo jumbo. Right. And same thing to this day. Like, I'm pretty sure was talking to him recently. He's like, yeah, my back, classic issue. And I'm like, did you ever ask yourself questions why your back?
Yeah.
As opposed to just letting it heal and then going back and doing the same stuff, right?
It's
stuck in stages.
It's essentially the yin and the yang of things, right? Like if you're taking that heavy yang approach constantly and never having a yin, then you're going to go off track. Like there's going to be like a balance, and even though you want to go straight up, it's going to veer off course. And similarly, if it's too light and everything's open and light and soft and intuitive and unstructured, then that will lead you off course too. It's the tension and the friction between the two, the yin and the yang, that then keeps things, along the way, on that path. But I think as long as you're paying attention and are conscious and stay focused on that goal, then definitely you start to incorporate different aspects. And people like us as coaches become useful in helping to guide and provide knowledge along that journey.
And help. And as I tell people all the time, right, not to be a lifer client. Like our goal as coaches, and almost to like segue to our next thing, to give, what was the last question? To
advice for new trainers.
What you're really trying to do is help people understand the cycle and understand what it means to progress and understand how to ask themselves questions. So that they can continually not just learn, like you're not trying to streamline them to what you do. You're trying to, teach them how to be open-minded and how to learn and how to ask questions, maybe through what you do, but allow them to have that ability to access other stuff and understand how to break it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And how to go through that. And you help guide them through a few heroes' journeys so that they can then guide themselves in future.
Yeah. And honestly, the cool thing too, guys, as trainers, don't forget that you can go on a hero's journey with a client.
Well, of course.
Why not? Right? Like you'll hopefully depends on the client, because I'm not knocking any people. There's people that are capable of stuff they don't even know about, that once you start teaching them, more capable than I am.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just sometimes the way it's how it goes. But like just because you're learning, I think that learning, especially when you're learning with someone, creates a camaraderie too with them, and it also shows people that you're willing to just admit that you don't know everything, and that you're continually putting an effort to go on the journey.
So it sounds like we're going into the fourth topic now. So let's make that let's make it a clear sort of marking point between between each of them. So our final topic, number 3, is I thought it would be good to talk about some advice that we would give for new trainers. And this for me was inspired by having a discussion with a client of mine, actually, who's looking to getting into personal training. And we might be having sort of an ongoing relationship in helping to guide him through that path. But it's a conversation.
A client there, a client here?
A client in Canada that I work with online.
Cool.
Young guy who's not personally. And I've had this conversation before, working in a gym, when new trainers come in and they're going to ask you if you've been around for a while for advice, or you might see something they're doing. But I just thought it would be an interesting conversation to have and see what your thoughts are on what, maybe just 2 or 3 top pieces of advice that you would give to a new trainer. It could be whether it's in regards to their technical skills, in terms of their knowledge of training. It might be their soft skills of communicating with their client. It might be in sort of the business skills of, how to acquire clients and kind of operate your own business, even if you are working for a gym. Any kind of, or maybe it could be how to manage your, your personal life and your relationships or whatever while being a trainer. Whatever you think would be good advice. What do you think would be good advice for a new personal trainer?
I think like a more like holistic answer for one of the things would be to just like we talk about all the time, just continue asking questions, learn, and apply what you're learning to yourself. Like literally, just because you learn something in the course doesn't mean that you can teach it. go through the hours, ask yourself the questions, ask yourself, why am I teaching this to someone?
And rep it out, like put it in,
Right.
train yourself within
That the
with that
groundwork,
material. Yeah.
right? The groundwork. Like if you go, I've seen it time and time again. Trainers go and take courses and they go learn and they just pass the test and they never actually apply what they do. They never ask the
And
questions.
often these tests are like jokes. It's the answers are basically
Exactly,
given to you.
right? And then don't get me wrong, the information is decent a lot of the times. You know what I mean? It's there in the books if you want to read it, and information's everywhere if you want to learn it. But don't just learn it to apply it to someone. Learn it to understand what it actually means. And I guess you can apply that to all things in life.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
you have to recognize that these things are businesses. So these
yeah.
certifications, like they're not going to survive if they don't have useful information that they can give you.
Yeah, and information that is going to appeal to like a mass.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to kind of do you want to understand more of it, or do you want to understand less of it? They're going to give you that middle ground, right?
And ultimately they want to make money, because that's why they're running the certification. Of course. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. So they're not going to make it so difficult to get certified that it turns people away. So a lot of these places will have good knowledge, and but they'll also make the test of whether you've actually absorbed this knowledge very, very easy.
Of course. And just like most things in life, guys, there's going to be ones to the left of the spectrum. They're going to be super cheap that aren't going to have great information. And then I'm sure there's ones like, if like you want to talk about like your quick experience with going to like Ito's boot camp, like that's like a whole other spectrum of like, you're paying a lot of money, but you're paying for like good information.
We're paying for an experience.
You know what I mean?
In a lot of cases, yeah.
Right. Well, so like it's available out there. Not all things are, right down the middle to the left or the right.
I don't necessarily believe that the better courses are ones you pay more for. In some cases, because it depends on the trainer, where they are at and what knowledge they need. Like what someone could be lacking is just really solid foundations that could be acquired, relatively cheaply, or maybe ironically the foundations, or clarity on the foundations, is the hardest thing to find.
Maybe then we should refine this to ask yourself the true honest question of where you are on the cycle.
Well, that's the thing. It's trying to understand what you don't know, and part of that comes with paying attention and really. It's a battle with the ego sometimes, because when you're working with clients, as a new trainer especially, you might be asked questions that you don't know the answer to, or you kind of you think you know the answer to, but then when you start explaining it, you realize I'm failing to articulate this. If I can't explain it to them, do I really understand it? So it's worth.
But that would be a yes for a lot of people. And if you're listening to this, guys, don't just stop at a yes there. Like, ask yourself the questions. If I don't know how to articulate this to someone, and I know what it is, but I don't know how to articulate to them. Maybe I don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
Don't just be content with saying, just do this. That's good.
Well, there are also tricks that we play on ourselves where we'll try to deflect, even internally. We might get asked a question and then we'll try to change the subject subtly, or reframe the question. Or maybe you're asking the wrong question, let me reframe it. And sometimes that's valid, but then sometimes, it's about being honest and about trying to just be calm and humble enough to sort of take note of it. Maybe you say, look, I don't know the answer to that, or you give whatever information you can, but acknowledge, look, that's the limit of my knowledge. But make note of those situations, because those are good clues as to what would be worth investigating further.
Of course. And just like Ben just said, it's okay to say you don't know.
Yeah.
As long as you're going to take the steps to learn.
Yeah. But then the next step is, what is it that you don't know? Like, if you try to formulate that into a question.
That's where you're asking the questions and stuff. Another big thing I would say about new trainers, especially, guys, just like anything in life, just like we talked about structure, just like we talked about the cycles, the ability that you guys are going to be able to train people and not get tired and write programs and doing all these things will become more efficient over time. But the key for a lot of trainers, and what they think is the key, is they try and bust 1,000,000 hours in the beginning, and they don't realize that writing programs and all these things are going to take them more time than all these experienced trainers. And all of a sudden you're not getting the quality out that you want to get out. You're tired for sessions, you're overworked. Other trainers you're seeing doing 8 hours and you think that you can do it like them, but don't forget, these people have interlocking programs with people. They've been training for years. They have clients that are coming on programs at every month versus you're getting a bunch of clients new at once where you're writing programs. They're all in the same cycle. You haven't had that year for them to kind of separate and, you know, fall in
the work isn't spread out. It's hitting you all at once.
Right. And on top of that, as we said, you don't know, you're not refined enough. You haven't learned enough. You might be able to program properly, but it's still going to take you time and thinking, is this right? Is this right? Yeah. And the more that you can learn, and as I said, the more time you take and the more you understand, you know, Ben has a shoulder problem. And with Ben's shoulder problem, we definitely have to do this, this, and this because he has problems with this, this, and this rotation. You know what I mean? But you don't know that in the beginning, or it takes you longer to understand that. Just pace yourself. Tortoise in the hare. You know, really try and understand that slow, you know, one step at a time is going to get you further than trying to run and slow down, run and slow down, run and slow down.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because I think, you know, it's taken me a long time, like years, to come up with a basic structure for how I write a program. And just literally the way I put it together, the basic kind of skeleton of it. And it's still something I iterate on, but
well, yeah, you spend we talked about refining, right? Like, even though you have something, doesn't mean you're not going to work on it, right?
Exactly. You spend a lot of time when you're starting off thinking about and trying on different methods. Like when you'll send one client a workout written one way, and then you'll send the next client 5 minutes later a workout written in a completely different format, because you're not sure what works best yet. And that takes a lot of time and energy to put that together. So I think that's a really good point, that the way you program becomes more efficient over time.
Yeah. And another thing, guys, understand the business side of it, and understand that you are a business. You're not a business. So understanding the business side is start to learn, you know, how to pitch what you're trying to sell to people. Learn how to put it into context. You know, if you're signing someone up, this is why you need the 3 months. This is why you need 6 months. This is why you need a year. Give people points as to why they need it and where the value's coming from. Understand how to have that one-on-one conversation. Then understand price point. Understand your worth. Understand what you're going to charge people. And one of the biggest things I found in the fitness industry, there seems to be almost like a lack of respect for the position. Everyone seems to like, and I don't know if that's years of like extreme fitness and all these other gyms like always like throwing like deals and discounts, and like everyone always thinks that there's some sort of deal and discount on, right? And it's different if you're working in a gym a lot of times, because they will have deals and discounts that you can kind of fluctuate. But if you're like a private trainer, don't let that same commercial mindset with the clients come to you. You know your worth, you know what your price point is, don't budge on it. You know, I'm not saying you have to sit and explain yourself what your worth is, but at the same time, you know, give examples as, listen, this is why I'm worth this much, and this is what you're going to get from me, and this is what you're not going to get from someone else.
Well, I think that ties into, I have a question for you about, you mentioned, you know, understanding things like why 3, 6, or 12 months of training would be appropriate. And I think that's a really interesting question for a new trainer, because something I struggled with is, well, I know, like, there's a great saying that in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is, right? Yes. So again, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. And so I had a lot of knowledge, theoretical knowledge going in about, you know, how long someone would probably need to train for to get certain results. But I hadn't actually seen it happen yet. And I hadn't put someone through the motions to get them to that point to know. So how would you recommend that a new trainer approach communicating that, or even putting together the kind of package that they recommend for a client when they themselves like don't have much experience working with clients, and it's a lot of just theoretical knowledge?
Of course. So it's all going to start with asking questions, right? You got to find out what their needs are, what their wants are, because then you can start to create that structure and formulate, right? You know, they can say stuff like, I have a wedding in 3 months. Okay, now you have a goal, right? You can write up a 3-month plan, right? Or they can say something like, you know what, I want to do a push-up. And then that's where you has to refining questions. What is your capabilities of push-ups now? Have you ever done a push-up before? All these things. So you're almost building none of it, just like you said, in what was it? Theory.
In theory, there's no difference between theory and practice.
Exactly.
In practice, there is.
Yeah. So everything's going to sound great. You could say 3 months here, but you always let people know too that these are all tentative. Right? Everything, this is like a perfect world. You know, this is you increase every set, you increase every rep, your mobility, you know what I mean? So you always let people know that goals are also need to be intertwined with life goals. And I think that's what's going to help you be able to create short snippets of goals. Like, okay, you know, we can look at increasing your weight by this much here, or lose this much weight by here. But at the same time, all this middle goal is all to get to a bigger picture of keeping you healthy for your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What I would advise, or what I do, that might be a little bit different, is that I don't necessarily look, if there's a case where someone has a very specific timeline they're working with, like a wedding coming up, then you can work within a 3-month period. You're a new trainer, someone comes in, I have a wedding in 3 months, I want to get in the best shape I can. Okay, we'll work together for 3 months, and then we'll take it from there if you still enjoy it after that. Otherwise, if there's no specific goal like that in mind, what I prefer is to go month by month. If it makes sense, because in that way, if you're working for a gym, they don't like it. You're going to really struggle with your fitness manager.
And just funny on that point, just because I was kind of the fitness manager at the time.
Yeah.
I found, funny enough, on that note, I had more people continue training for long term, buy bigger packages after the first month, and then continue those 3-month packages after, than a lot of the people that I sold for 3 or 6 months. Because in a weird way, 1 month is open-ended. It's like, get a taste, let me know if you like the taste, and we could teach you how to cook.
Yeah.
3 months is like, no matter how much you tell them that they're going to need to do this for life and they continue training. I've seen so many people after 3 months, after getting progress and looking good, going back to the gym, like that 3 months is over, and like, that's it, it's in that box.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's it. 3 months. That's, you know what I mean? I that's why I really kind of even like that. And that's why I even argued with head office a lot of the times. Right. They made an exception for us writing 1 month contracts.
Yeah.
It's not something that they wanted. Minimum was 3 months. And I said, you know what, you guys, it's not going to work.
Well, it's like anything. The business wants to get the biggest commitment from you up front to guarantee the most amount of money. But the best thing they're going to be, I think, for the client and for the trainers to do, at least to start with a month, because it's a lower risk for the client. They can just choose to make a relatively small investment and see how it goes.
And I think even the mindset changes in a weird way too.
Yeah, so I think a big part of it is, the mindset changes. There's maybe less expectation, because it's like, okay, I'm just gonna. Well, it also allows you to focus, because you're just focusing on that 4-week period. Just that 4-week period rather than a whole month. But another thing that I think really helps as a trainer is that I like to renew monthly. This is, I know it's not great for business necessarily, but I would argue that it can be, because what it tells you is that you are doing a good job every month. Because if your client is coming back and paying you month by month, rather than just being locked into a 6-month contract where, let's say they get a third of the way through it and they realize this isn't actually the best thing for them. You don't really click as well as you thought you did initially. Maybe the trainer had a great initial program for like a couple of weeks, but then it didn't progress anywhere. So it's just random workouts or not going anywhere. But I'm locked in for 6 months. So fuck, what am I going to do? I may as well just stick with it.
For both of you.
And then it sucks for both of you, because you feel it in the session, especially if it's unspoken. But it is a trainer, if you're doing it month by month, it puts pressure on you. And I think as long as you're choosing this pressure for yourself, it can be really healthy if you want it. It puts pressure on you to continue to do well, especially for those clients that are really long-term.
To be better, I think.
To be better,
get better, right? Because as they're getting better, it's not like you're going to just coast them through the 6 months, because, you know, they have 6 months and you'll get another chum after 6 months.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like, shit, this guy's progressing. And maybe at a certain point, if he keeps going, he's going to push me to like, you know what I mean?
And that you actually touched on another good consequence financially of doing those big packages, is that if you sign someone up for 6 months and all your packages are 6 months, then what ends up happening is, especially as a new trainer, because a lot of these contracts come in up front. So everyone's starting at the same date and their contract runs out at roughly the same point. And you're a new trainer, let's be honest, you're probably not great yet. You're probably not very good, because it's all theory. It's not a lot of practice. Let's say you're really personable, everyone loves you, you've got a great 2-week program, but again, maybe you don't have the understanding of how to progress and go deeper into the technique of it. But so what often happens is you get 6 months in, and then everyone's up for renewal, but a lot of them aren't going to renew. So you're used to being on 6 months of a certain salary, a certain income, and all of a sudden that drops down by 10, 15, 20, 30, 40%. And you have to make adjustments.
Very, very common, by the way.
That's what I'm saying. And it's
very
so jarring to your lifestyle. So I like month by month too, because it means that any little like if you're going to lose a client, you lose them within that month, and then you replace it in that month.
And that's the cool thing.
And it's more iterative throughout the year.
Yeah. And even like having bad taste in your mouth, like I've had so many times where people sign up for long term and something tragic happens, and then it becomes a fiasco, giving the money back. You're not going to get money back, as opposed to like, you have 1 month, and then something bad happens. You're like, shit, Ben, I can't pay next month. You're like, no problem.
Yeah.
And then they come back the month after that, and then they're good for the rest of the time. But if they can't get their money back, and that becomes a stress on their life, our job here is to mitigate all stress, because mental stress equals physical stress, right? And the last thing we want, as much as we're physical, aids, we're mental aids to a certain extent too, because physical is mental, as I said, right? And we have to understand that, like, we don't want to add that stress to them. Our job is to kind of take away that stress, help them understand and mitigate their stress in their life. That's part of our job too. And I've seen a lot of stress come out of high commitment programs.
Yeah.
So, even as you were saying earlier, even the stress of like the commitment.
Yeah.
Even if everything's going great, you're like, oh, I got fucking 5 months left. As opposed to almost looking forward to like the next month, like, oh, this month was so great.
And a lot of people,
I can't wait to buy more.
A lot of people don't know where they're going to be in 6 months' time, And
look where you are. Look where you are.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And 6 months can be a world, but you can literally go halfway across the planet.
We were talking about 6 months ago now. We're probably smoking J's in person.
Yeah.
6 or 7 months now. Give or take.
Exactly. So it's I think it's it gives the client a sense of choice. It feels like they're actually choosing to be there with you. It gives you the confidence to know that they're choosing to be there with you month by month, that they're turning up because they love working with you. They love you as your trainer, rather than because you've got them really psyched in one sales session, but then they're locked in for 6 months and that motivation has just gone downhill from there, and that just sucks. If you're working for a big box gym, they're not going to love it. But
if you do it right, no one will say anything, man. The one thing we've noticed in big box gyms, if you're making them money, there's a certain cutoff where they'll say, I don't give a fuck, just do whatever you want.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like I remember back in the day, there was a guy, Enea, at Young and Dundas Good Life. Italian guy, Italian stallion, Enea. Enea. He was the number 1, number 2 in classes, like in sales and renewals and classes, company-wide, Canada-wide, probably like 8 years in a row. And it was mostly number 1. This guy didn't show up to the bi-yearly meetings or whatever they had, the like 2 meetings a year, nothing. This guy was staying in the gym, running classes, just doing his thing. And his name would be on the board, number 1. And just my boss would go take his award. Like, it was just didn't show up for any monthly meetings, didn't show up for anything. But this is where he's personable to everyone, knew everyone in the gym, talked to everyone in the gym. But this is where it goes. If you're just so good at what you do, no one's going to bother you.
Yeah.
But an asterisk on the month to month, I will say.
Yeah, for sure.
If you are a trainer that wants to be cookie cutter, sign them up for the 6 months, because you're going to just do the same stuff over and over again. I don't advise you being that trainer, because I don't think you're going to go far, and I don't think you're going to succeed too much. But what the month to month will do for you, as Ben was saying, it will force you to continue learning, and it will force you to continually want to be better. And if you're looking for that, then it could be a successful model for 2 reasons. 1, forceful learning and forceful just progression, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean courses, right? That could mean you working out, asking your body questions, keeping you on par, versus getting lazy within that 6 months, because whatever, these people are locked in. I can get, out of shape, and you know.
Yeah, that's great. So I think that I don't know. I think that's pretty good for today.
Let's do it. My ears hurt. I gotta get new headphones, man.
That could be on the bucket list for improvements for a future episode.
New headphones or smaller ears, because I don't got the smallest ears in the world.
Just put some ice cubes on them before you start.
I'm gonna wear ice cube headphones.
Ice cube headphones, perfect. Just like the mugs.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. I like the A&W mugs.
And you should wear a white shirt so you gradually get wetter and more translucent as the...
Listen, Ben, we'll save that for episode 8. That's the end of the cycle. That's when we get people. That's when we get people through the first cycle
of this ongoing spiral.
What are we at? What are we, number 3 now? We're learning. When are we gonna have the disaster?
Like we have to pay a heavy price in 3 episodes from now. Right now we're entering an unfamiliar situation, which is true to some degree.
Think about that, eh? Yeah. What's the heavy price? Steven's ears.
Well, you have to tune in to find out.
That's it, Benjamin.
It's been awesome, man. Thank you very much.
As usual. Over and out.
Thank you for listening. You've been watching Meditative Monkeys episode 3. Till next time.
I'm gonna have to get a meditative monkey tattoo.
That's a commitment.
Hey, it's still recording. You guys heard it here first.
Wow.
Maybe sooner than you think.